About the violence thing is like, I always thought that peer groups could not do it all to fix themselves. And you can't get like an old head to talk to a young head with a generation gap or two between them. For example, I said this 25 years ago. If you don't have 20-year-olds talking to teens, if you don't have 30-year-olds talking to 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds also being in the mix, you can't expect a 50 or 40-year-old to talk to a teenager. It's not gonna work. Where's the middle ground? Where's today's average, 25 to 40-year-old? Where are they in the mix? Are they thinking that they're individualized to the point where they're trying to impress a younger demographic? Or are they trying to actually aspire to being an old head? For the first time, we have 2 or 3 generations in the middle who are unsure which way they should go. Back in the day, 25, 34, 40 years, even let's go 50 years ago, me and Hank would walk into a bar trying to see if we can hang a flyer in there, and it'd be like a whole bunch of 50, 60-year-old people in there drinking like scotch, turning around looking like, well, what are you doing up in here? They wasn't trying to have no part of young life up in there. They wasn't trying to impress. They was in there listening to Arthur Prysock and stuff like that. I mean, really, Brooke Benton, Dinah Washington, and that was that. So you knew your lane. Biggest thing is when age categories and generations don't know their lane, you're gonna have all kinds of side effects. So you got a whole bunch of people who are just like somewhere else trying to talk to young people on how they should look at their life. That language has to be able to hit young people coming from somebody that young people want to be next. If somebody 25 years old ain't looking at themselves as old, they looking at themselves as young, then you're gonna have that uncertainty. I talk to people all the time when they say they're young. I'm telling you how, you say you young, you're not really young. You younger than some, but older than many. You're 22 years old. You're 4 years over 18. You're not young. Yes, you're a young adult, but you're not young. Once people are over 40, they end up saying, well, everybody's young. And they start coming up with these brushstrokes like, yeah, the youth. What are you talking about, the youth? The youth is 0 to 18, and boom, that's the cutoff point, because the Army will take you and put you somewhere to fight. Youth is not 27 years old unless they're deemed to be youth by another structure or institution, which is the USA government trying to say, well, really, none of y'all got no power. You're all individual, you don't collect. So all of y'all are youth. We treat you like kids. We've seen a country that treats grown black folks for the last 150 years like children because they said, well, y'all are no threat. You're a little bit of a threat as a people, as a collective effort, but not being collective, you're no threat to the structures that are here in place. Now, that's not overtly said, but it's subtle. That's why it takes a combination of a lot of people to make change. But there was once upon a time where black folks understood that our collectivity amongst ourselves, looked upon as a race, will defend against a lot of BS that goes down out there. Even if we go further into the music was always a defense in itself. It was always an extension of an aunt, uncle up in your crib when it was played. That turnaround came in the 80s. There was a bunch of different individual trails that were going different ways for a bunch of different reasons. We called it R&B, Reagan and Bush. And in that period, that 8 to 12-year period from 1980 to 1992, a lot of things went down, which further separated, black generations. Once upon a time, I'm from the 60s and the 70s, if you played football, basketball, any sports, at once upon a time, the fathers are damn near like rivaled the number of sons that were on the field. Today, you might see kids play sports, and it's like kids playing sports, the number 50. Fathers on the sideline, maybe 10. You kind of see a difference, though, in different parts of the country with Latinos, where everybody plays some soccer like out west. And the fathers are damn near outnumbering the sons because the fathers all work together. Black men don't work together. We don't have our hood skill set brought up to a level where it can actually be provided in the hood and fix everything in the hood on our own, not waiting for white America to give you a job. Once upon a time, it used to be that because the fathers in Chicago, in New York, in the urban areas, they all worked together. So if their sons was out there playing baseball, which was the black American sport, they was at the games too. Socially, we have to go into the core of the dynamic of race in the United States of America. As we go further into the future, the dynamic of race without knowing histories and without knowing people and having real conversation with real folk because they die off, you know, it gets further and further blurry. Unfortunately, I lost my father last month at this time. Hardest thing in my life. It was an honor to be that man's son. When I tell people that, they don't hear anything like that. I say, wow, that strikes me. But you know, it's an honor to be a good man's son. And then I thought my dad was the best. The point I'm trying to say is that if my dad, who was born in Harlem in 1938, if he's gonna talk about Harlem in the 1940s, he's gonna talk directly from experience and talking to real people about the real deal. You can't really go back in documentaries or hearsay or even sometimes text or whatever the new media might say as they're cutting out just to make it palatable for new heads. That essence is gone. So you're not gonna get the real deal a lot of time as time goes forward and history becomes further back. And if people dismiss history, then anything can happen because the dynamic of race and of people in the United States of America and young people, you know, getting ill in the streets and what can society do, it goes back to the core. Latino men in the West especially, they work together. They 14 deep putting together a roof, doing regular basic things that they used to teach in schools that then they say you gotta pay for in trade school, that they probably now say that you gotta go to some kind of junior college to learn carpentry and putting a bathtub in right and go to YouTube and this structure sets it up. You show me black men over 40 years old, outside of music, outside of sports, working together and I'll pin a badge on your chest. Regular people work too, every day, hood work.
The problems come from home first. Like you can't blame it on this, you can't blame it on the police, you can't blame it on the white man. You know, after a while shit, you know, they also do fucked up shit, but in fear of consequences, it's supposed to start at home.
Brooklyn, New York was a little bit, like when I was super young, like 6, 7, 8, 9, it wasn't so bad. But by the time I turned 13, things in the neighborhood took a turn. So the music was a way for me to really just, you know, not hanging out with the wrong crowd.
I walked with the biggest shoulders in the world to say, I got this, you don't have this. This is the power that I have. To me, the tangible medium, it means everything because it gave you a leverage.
I called Chuck and I said, Chuck, did you hear this? And he was like, yo, Hank, I was listening to the same thing. That shit got me on fire. I'm pissed. He said, so we went in and made what we considered to be the inverse of I Know You Got Soul, which was Rebel.